Welcome to the old Royal Irish Constabulary Barracks in the village of Cliffoney in North Sligo. My name is Margaret Byrne, and myself and my husband live here. This is our home. Today, October the 25th, is the centenary of the Moneygold ambush, and we are here to remember Moneygold. We will start with a 5-minute tour of Cliffoney village.
Welcome to the village of Cliffoney in North Sligo. The name Cliffoney originates from the Irish Cliffoney, which means place of the thickets. These are dense bushes or trees. Cliffoney, the village itself, was the Irish seat of Lord Palmerston, twice Prime Minister of England, whose family owned 10,000 acres in the area since the Cromwellian era, and he first came here in 1808. He was involved with 5 of the main buildings in the village. The first building was the market house, which he renovated to become the Cliffoney Inn in 1820. This is where the twice Prime Minister Lord Palmerston stayed, and he was personally involved in every detail of its renovation by the famed architect and builder Nimmo, who also built the harbour in Mullaghmore and Nimmo's Pier in Galway. The second building was the boys' school, opened in 1824. This building is now the community hall. When the building became vacant on the opening of a new combined national school in 1914, the then curate, Father Michael O'Flanagan, asked Palmerston's successor, Viscount Ashley, for the keys of the vacant school to be used as a village hall. It later became known locally as Father O'Flanagan's Sinn Féin Hall. In reprisal for the Moneygold ambush, this hall was burned along with a number of homes belonging to the chief suspects in the ambush. The building was rebuilt by the church and renamed the Cliffoney Parochial Hall. The third building was the girls' school. It was completed in 1826, directly across from the current National School. And in spite of Palmerston's patronage of the building, the parish priest at the time, Father McHugh, would not allow children to attend either school unless Roman Catholic teachers were appointed. A distinguished visitor here in the 1870s was the leading Fenian John Devoy, who was visiting his sister, who was a teacher in the school at the time. Then after the girls moved to the new school, the old school became the home of the R.I.C. Sergeant Patrick Perry, his wife Margaret Sharkey, and their 10 children. The fourth building is the Roman Catholic Church of St. Malicious of Inishmurray. This was completed in 1828. The curate here from 1914 to 1915 was Father Michael O'Flanagan, the rebel priest, who later became president of Sinn Féin. Father Michael, after a number of clashes with Bishop Coyne, including the Turf War, was controversially transferred to Roscommon. The people objected and locked the church on the 17th of October 1915 for 10 weeks. Every Sunday they prayed the rosary outside the church at the present Calvary. This was a custom imported from St. Malicious Island of Inishmurray, where the islanders used to pray the rosary every Sunday since they had no priest to say Mass. 2 infants known as the rebel babies could not be baptised in their now locked local church. They were Jack Waters, who was born on the 16th of October when the priest's transfer was announced, and John Rattigan, born on the 17th of October when the church was locked by the locals. During renovations in 2012, it was discovered that 3 stained glass windows behind the altar were made by Joshua Clarke, father of renowned stained glass artist Harry Clarke and husband of Cliffoney native Bridget McGonigal. The 5th building was the Royal Irish Constabulary Barracks, which was completed in 1842 and occupied by the Royal Irish Constabulary until 1922. The R.I.C. members, who were all Catholics, attended Mass in St. Malicious Church and were often jarred from the pulpit by Father O'Flanagan. The building was bought by Jack Rattigan, father of the rebel baby John, in 1925. on condition that he lease it back to the state. It became a Garda barracks until the late 1970s, when a new Garda barracks was built beside the church.
The word remember means to recall or recollect. But how do we remember something that happened before we were born? Some of us never met the people involved, and the events of 1920 were largely never discussed in many families. It was a past that was never spoken about. Today, we take a different meaning from the word remember, to make someone a member again, to bring them back amongst us. So for all of us involved today, let us bring the people we knew and the people we never met back to our families and to our communities. We will go back to this day 100 years ago. At around 11:30 o'clock on a Monday morning on the 25th of October, a 9-man patrol left this building. At Moneygold, some 4 miles south of here, just outside the village of Grange, they cycled into an ambush. 4 men were killed, 2 were badly injured, and 3 survived. Meanwhile, on the same day, in Brixton and Cork prisons, 2 men died while on hunger strike. We now acknowledge all 6 men and their families. Constable Patrick Keown. Thanks to Elizabeth McKee for this information. Patrick was born in 1890 to Charles and Ellen Keown. They were farmers from Ederney, County Fermanagh. Patrick and his brothers returned home safely from World War I and set back to work on the family farm. Patrick applied to join the R.I.C. on the 3rd of May 1990, but was dismissed as unfit, probably due to his experience in the war. He immediately reapplied and was accepted on June 1920. Patrick was 24 years old and had only served for 4 months when he died at Moneygold. When Patrick's body was returned home to Ederney for burial, one of the guards of honour was Nicholas McCormack from County Wexford. Nicholas met Patrick's younger sister, Catherine, and they were married a few years later. Constable Patrick Laffey. Patrick Laffey was a Roman Catholic. All of the men who died were Catholics. Patrick was a native of Galway and was 5'10". He joined the R.I.C. in March 1901, aged 21 years, and was allocated to Limerick on the 24th of September. His next posting was back to Galway on August the 31st, 1907. It was a short posting, just 2 months, and he was moved back to Limerick. Then on the 1st of October 1910, he was moved to Sligo. He died at the scene of the ambush and left a wife and 5 children. Constable Patrick Lynch. Patrick Lynch was born on the 11th of March, 1887. He was a native of Cavan he was 5'9". He joined the R.I.C. in 1908, aged 21 years. His first posting was to Galway, where he stayed for 7 years. He then came to Sligo in 1916. He was mortally wounded during the ambush and was moved to Sligo Infirmary, where he succumbed to his wounds 2 days later. He left a wife and 2 children. He is buried in Ballyborough, County Cavan. Lord Mayor of Cork, Terence MacSwiney. He was born in 1879 at 23 North Main Street in Cork City to John MacSwiney and his wife, Mary Wilkinson. He was educated as an accountant and was also a playwright, poet, and writer of pamphlets of Irish history. He was one of the founders of the Cork Brigade of the Irish Volunteers in 1913 and was the president of the Cork branch of Sinn Féin. He married Muriel Murphy and they had 1 child, Myra. After the murder of his friend Thomas McCurtain, he was elected Lord Mayor. He was arrested on the 12th of August and sent to Brixton prison. He immediately started a hunger strike and after 77 days died on this day 100 years ago. Joseph Patrick Murphy. Joe was born on the 10th of May, 1895, in America to Timothy Murphy and Nora O'Brien. They returned to Cork and Joe was educated at Tower National School. He had a keen interest in Gaelic sports and road bowling. Joe joined the Irish Volunteers in 1917 and became a member of H Company, 2nd Battalion, Cork No. 1 Brigade, in which he was very active. Joe was arrested on July the 15th, 1920, and was imprisoned in Cork County Jail. He went on hunger strike, and after 76 days without food, he died on this day 100 years ago. He is buried in the Republican plot at St. Finbarr's Cemetery, Cork. He was 25 years old. Sergeant Patrick Perry, and thanks to Madeline for this information. Patrick Perry was born in Ballivor, County Meath, on the 19th of November, 1868. At the age of 25, he joined the R.I.C. He was farming prior to this. His initial posting was to Rathtarman Barracks, Lisserloch, and it was here, at a dance, that he met his future wife, Margaret Sharkey. They were married in 1901. He was appointed acting sergeant in 1907 and promoted to sergeant in 1909. He served in Ballintower and Bunanadden before his return transfer to Cliffoney in 1913. He would have known Father Michael O'Flanagan. Patrick and Margaret had 11 children. 7 were born in Cliffoney and 3 in Monaghan. The last and 11th child was born in 1921, after the ambush. Patrick Perry was almost 52 years old when he died and is buried with his wife's people in County Roscommon, in Killare Cemetery. I'd like to introduce you to Michael O'Connor.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Michael O'Connor. I was born in Bunduff, which is a little townland 2 miles north of Cliffoney village. I now spend my time between Fuerteventura in the Canary Islands and Sligo. My love of poetry was instilled in Castlegal National School by Miss Herity and Mrs. Hennessy, our 2 teachers. Mrs. Hennessy was, in fact, the wife of Sergeant John Hennessy, who was the sergeant in charge of Cliffoney for many, many years. And they lived in the old barracks, the old R.I.C. barracks. Growing up, we didn't hear much of Moneygold. It was something we knew happened, but the details were never discussed in our house. And in fact, I never heard it discussed anywhere, really. So when I went to write this poem, I had to do a little bit of research, and I hope you like what I have written, and I hope it's good for everybody. Moneygold. I sat beside an old man once, a neighbour of my own, chatting about days long ago when Ireland was reborn. His eyes stared off into a place, a time so long ago. He looked at me and he softly asked, "Have you heard of Moneygold?" I shook my head and he stood up. He walked to the open door. He stood there for a moment, then walked back across the floor. He sat beside me once again, and he began to speak. I'll ne'er forget that Monday morn. I'll ne'er forget that week. 1920, County Sligo, October 25th. A Monday morning, bright and clear, we waited at that ditch. An ambush, set for a patrol, policemen on their way. From Cliffoney barracks they set forth on that October day. The autumn breeze had chased the clouds, the sun was shining bright. Near the graveyard of a hamlet, we'd lain there through the night. The trap, it had been baited, some damage to a cart. We knew the owner would complain, and a crime he would report. Mid-morning, we then espied a group of 9 or 10. Sergeant Perry to the front, as he led out his men. We waited till they reached our spot, then ordered them to stop. They jumped down from their bicycles. 'Twas then I heard the shots. The battle lasted for some time. The road, it soon ran red. When the firing stopped and the smoke had cleared, 4 R.I.C. lay dead. The sounds of those now wounded would tear at your heartstrings, a price that's universal for the freedom that it brings. A nurse of ours then tended to the wounded on the road. Arrangements made to get them aid from the hell of Moneygold. We gathered up their weapons and headed on our way. No one cheered or shouted. It was a somber day. The days that came brought swift revenge, most by the blackened hands. Houses burned and men interned in Belfast and beyond. The creamery was set ablaze, as was the local hall. Vacated home of the murder gang, they painted on the wall. Eventually things settled down and a peace of sorts was won. After civil war, a brutal war, pitted father against son. So many tales of death and pain, many stories to be told. I've told with truth and honesty the tale of Moneygold. So now each time I pass that place, I think of those days past. I pray for my old comrades who won the peace at last. But also, when I say those prayers, if the truth were to be told, I also pray for those who died that day in Moneygold.
We will now relight the candles and bring the family members back to their families. Today, we remember Patrick Perry and the Perry family. Today, we remember Joe Patrick Murphy and the Murphy family. Today, we remember Terence MacSwiney and the MacSwiney family. Today, we remember Patrick Lynch and the Lynch family. Today, we remember Patrick Laffey and the Laffey family. Today, we remember Patrick Keown and the Keown family. Yes, we'll now have a piece of music. It's called Bonnie Portmore. It's I arranged it myself for this occasion. It's played on the Gaelic wire strung harp, which is the ancient harp of Ireland.
Hello, my name is Michael Farry, and I'm delighted to attend and contribute to this remembrance ceremony. I've written extensively on the history of Sligo during the period 1912 to 1923, and I've read much of the material about the Moneygold or Cliffoney ambush. And there are some details of the ambush which are particularly interesting. It does seem that the police were well aware that the vandalism report about the cutting of the cart shafts belonging to a man they believed was pro-British could be a ruse to lead them into an ambush. It was policy at that time that a cycling patrol of R.I.C. should proceed in extended formation, not as a close group. This was the cause, for instance, of the failure of the ambush by South Sligo I.R.A. at R.I.C. across the border in Roscommon. The Cliffoney policemen seem not to have done this, and they presented an easier target. Another item of interest is the disparity in numbers on each side. There were roughly 38 ambushers, while the cycling patrol consisted of 9 policemen. One of the ambushers was a regular bell ringer at the local church, Grange, and the ambush was over just in time for him to run across the fields and ring the Angelus bell. I'm a native of Sligo and I live in Trim, County Meath, so I've been particularly interested in Sergeant Patrick Perry, who was killed in the ambush. He came from Coolronan, Ballivor, which is quite close to Trim, and indeed I knew some of his relatives in the South Meath area before I knew of their connection with him. I've also visited his grave at Killaret Cemetery in South Sligo, near Boyle, where he was buried with his in-laws. It's interesting that the headstone which has his name on it, which was erected by his wife, does not have any mention of the cause of death or of his membership of the R.I.C. I also write poetry, and my recent collection deals with that same period, using the more freer medium of poetry. And I'm now going to read a poem of mine which I wrote in the voice of Patrick Perry, trying to give some expression to the confusion and difficulty of career policemen like him, faced with the relatively sudden change in public opinion and the growing threat of violence. And in this poem, I've given him his full name and his rank and his number. R.I.C. Sergeant Patrick Perry, 56270, killed in the Moneygold ambush, 25th of October, 1920. I am cornered between the mountain and the ocean on this bare strip, exposed, far from the flat security of Coolronan, hanging on for the pension. Gradually, we have become outcasts, the local enemy, caught between careless government and wide-eyed idealists. So we keep quiet here, make no ripples. I suspect that this reported vandalism is a trap, but remind my men of duty. Lead a patrol, 9 cyclists. For a sawn-off cart shaft I will lay down my life. We took up our greatcoats, sling rifles, faced the merciless October wind, pedalled south towards 40 fellow countrymen behind ditches, intent on making headlines, challenging an empire with shotgun, rifle and revolver. Just before the Angelus bell, we will reach their position and they will open fire, killing fathers, sons, husbands, 4 Irishmen about their daily business, earning the king's shillings, pushovers, peacekeepers in this new age when peacekeeping has gone out of fashion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you very much. as Michael mentioned there, the story of the Angelus bell, we are coming up to the Angelus very shortly, but before we come up to the Angelus, I would like to mention Patrick Clarke. This candle here behind Patrick Keown. Patrick Clarke died at the Creevy ambush by himself. He was just on his own. There are conflicting reports about why he was in Creevy. Some say he went for cigarettes or the newspaper. He died 8 months after the other 4 Patricks. And so he was the 5th Patrick. And I'd just like to mention him here at this point. Hal Hennigan wrote a book about his father. Just here. And Hal told me during the week that his father died on the 25th of October.
My father came from a hamlet near Moneygold, and in 1920 was stationed at Bundoran. He would have known the 4 Patricks. Most of them had been members of the police trade union before it was suppressed by the government. A decade after the Free State was established, he returned to Sligo and died there in 1957 on this day. John Hennigan died in October 1957 after a very short illness. He took his secrets and his painful memories to his grave. He did not live to see the celebrations of 1966, nor the atrocities which would be visited on Ireland and on Britain in the decades to follow. He had already experienced his share of horrors. As I stood at his funeral, an uncomprehending 15-year-old, receiving the condolences of people I did not know, the word I heard repeatedly was gentleman. I couldn't quite understand how this austere man, who rarely showed emotion, could inspire so much obvious respect and affection. And yet, I'd seen him show compassion and indeed sentimentality, qualities not always appreciated by an adolescent. It needed the influence of my own son and the pain of losing my own son and many years of life to gain an imperfect comprehension. It has taken me a long time to give him and his comrades this small recognition. Let us commemorate all who behaved honorably, whatever their convictions.
So thank you, Hal. Thank you, Hal, for that. So before we go to the Angelus, I would like to thank you all for your support and encouragement. To our contributors, Michael O'Connor and Michael Farry, thank you very, very much. That was wonderful, really wonderful. A very special thanks to the families of the policemen who knocked on the barracks door to find out more. Brian and Elizabeth McKee, Madeline, Colette, Laura, and the 2 Brendans. And the community here in Cliffoney who helped and sponsored the candles here. And finally, to my husband, Martin, for the technology. Thank you all. And now we listen to the Angelus